Okay, let's start our travels with this one from Google here. Let's go to DeviantArt, the DeviantArt website, and I'm going to click on the stock images link here. And in the box, let's type something like studio and see what we can find. A nice sample image to work with. Let's have a look. I quite like that one. That one's called, what's it, Cardinal 14, from a nice set there from someone called Fave Stock. So I'll click on the download link. That should load into a browser, which it has, and if I right click and save the image, let's call it Red Girl onto the desktop there. So close that browser down, let's hop over to Photoshop. Let's get the girl open and let's begin masking. In fact, let me just zoom in there a little bit. Because of the redness coming through on the arm and some light wrap on the hand, I suspect we may have to do a little bit more work with our masking with this one. First of all, let's crop the image out. I press C on the keyboard then, by the way, to access the crop tool, and I'll hit the enter key to crop that access data off. And if we look at our channels, we should see red is the light, obviously, because she's draped in red. Green will be slightly darker, and as I suspected, blue will give us the most contrast. So I'm going to drag that down and copy it there. Control and plus on the keyboard to zoom in. Now I'm going to start developing this channel for a mask, but I'm going to watch this area around the arm and the hand because we'll have to be careful about what's going on there. I'll press Control and L on the keyboard. So let's get the background white and the interior of the hand and arm black. Like so. I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit, see what's going on with the image. I'll click OK. That's fine up to now, but we'll need to I suspect use the dodge tool on the highlights at quite a high setting here, just to get rid of some of this data, move it down out of the way and from around the hand there. Now I'll make a selection with the selection tool, just a rough selection there of this area, and I'm going to bring up the levels palette again and give it another second pass, so Control L, and let's brighten up that background now. If I did that with the first pass, we would have lost detail on the hand and the arm, so I've had to really give this 2 rounds. But you can see how quickly and easily we did that. It saves, it's really no time at all. Now let's zoom in a bit, and there's some bits to clear up. I'll press B on the keyboard to get the brush, and we're in black there. And I'll just quickly and easily just paint out these bits here. We're not after a perfect job with this, depending on what we want to do with it, of course, but we'll just quickly clear these bits up. These bits of grey that are hanging around the edge there, these are the drop shadow. There's no point in trying to deal with them now. We can deal with them later on, depending on the background we use with a layer mask. But while we can quickly and easily just clear these bits up, we may as well just spend a few moments time doing that, because that will save a little bit of hassle later on. Now then, let's select the white background itself. We can do that with some form of the magic wand tool. I'll just click on, and there we go, that's got all the white selected. We need to inverse that selection. Select inverse, Shift Control I from the keyboard, so it's actually the black of the model that's selected now, and let's fill that with black, so that the interior now is completely filled with black. And I'll press Control D on the keyboard to drop the selection. Now, in an earlier movie I mentioned the importance of slightly blurring the mask, and I'll show you why, and I'll explain now. If I zoom in like this, if I was to bring up levels now, Control L on the keyboard, Watch this mask while I'm adjusting the layers palette. There's virtually nothing going on there. It's very little. It's certainly not expanding and contracting, which is what we want. And the reason for that is there's no pixel data in the transition. We're going from white straight through to black with no tonal grey transition in between. However, if I blur the mask and give it a blur such as so, I'm going to zoom in even further here so that you can actually see we're going from white through some shades of grey before we get to black. And because of that, let me press Control- on the keyboard now to zoom back out a little. Watch what happens now when I press Control and L to bring up levels on the keyboard, and keep an eye on what's going on with this, what will become the selection or the mask. It's expanding and contracting, and the reason it's doing that is because we created that extra pixel data. Now that's crucial later on when we're trying to choke the mask, which is basically what I'm doing here. It's choking the mask one way or the other, and that's the real reason for creating this slight feathering to the mask itself, which is probably completely the opposite to what you'd read in many books and magazines that would give you examples on this. Their idea of feathering the mask would be to feather it into the background that you're doing some compositing with, but that's completely the wrong idea, and it will give you the wrong results. The reason we're feathering, once again I'll just point out, it's so that we can choke the mask, which has the effect of expanding or contracting the selection. That being done, let's move out, Control- on the keyboard. Let's go to the layers palette. I'll double click and click OK. That's unlocked the background layer. We'll load channel 4 as a selection, and we can do that by pressing Control Alt and the number 4 from the keyboard. There's our selection loaded, and I'll hit the mask button here. That's okay, the mask's the wrong way around, but as I've mentioned earlier, probably it makes no difference. We can invert the mask from the keyboard, Control I, and you can see that's given us this really nice cutout for the selection. Now we may need to choke this mask. It'll depend upon what kind of background we're intending to put behind or underneath this model, and you'll see that happening in just a moment. In fact, let's open the documents folder up, and let's go off and find just some sort of a texture just to play around with and drop in behind, like that one. So I'll press the F key a couple of times. You can see we've got two separate windows, this being the texture, that being the model. I think I'll rotate this texture before I do anything with it. Image, rotate canvas 90 degrees. And now I can grab the layer there and drop it into this file. I'll close that. Don't need to save the changes. I'm going to press the F key a couple of times to center my view there. And I'll press the V key that accesses this tool, the move tool, to move this up and over. Let's drag it down beneath the model in the layers palette. I'll press Control and T on the keyboard to access our transform tools. And there we go, I'll hit enter. And that's given us some form of background to work with there. Let's just move this model over slightly. Okay, I'm going to get back onto the background and slightly give it, try and give it a 3D type look to give it a floor, more of a floor to stand on. Let's grab the marquee selection tool and just drag out a selection like this. Now if I do what I did a moment ago, Control T, that gives us our control handles, and if you press Control Shift and Alt, hold those keys down together, that will put you into perspective mode, which I need for transforming these corners out this way. Just to alter this perspective, I'll hit enter on the keyboard, and while that selection is still going, I'm going to soften the selection by right clicking and choosing feather. Something like 50 will do. and actually I want not this area within this selection to be selected. I want the outside area, and to do that we can inverse the selection. So it's this upper area now that's become selected, and with that selection in place there, I'll press Ctrl and L on the keyboard, and let's just slightly darken that background off a little, and I'll press Ctrl D on the keyboard to drop the selection there. Let's zoom in a little, and you can see now the edges of this dress and the model's arm, which is why we took the time earlier on to blur the edge of this mask. I'll click on the mask itself. Now, because we blurred it earlier, it will give us now the opportunity to choke the mask. I'll do that by pressing Ctrl L on the keyboard, and if you can see that works beautifully. We're just compressing, choking the mask down. I'll click OK, and I'll zoom back out, and this is all working out quite nicely. I think we've finished with this mask now, so I'm going to right click on the mask and choose Apply. We want to apply the mask. So it leaves us, if I grab the Move tool, that was the letter V on the keyboard for the Move tool, the model herself, sorry. I'm going to copy that layer, and clicking on the one underneath, hold the Control key down and click on the thumbnail. That loads the transparency mask for the layer. That was Control clicking on the thumbnail. Now if I just turn this upper layer off, let's deal with this layer. I'm going to fill it with black. Black's in the foreground. If you want to do it from the keyboard, press Alt and Backspace. I'll do that now. And let's drop the selection, Control D. And let's give this some blurring, Gaussian blur. We're basically going to create some kind of drop shadow here, just a nice soft edge shadow. Let's just turn this model back on, but we're dealing with the shadow layer here. I'll press Ctrl T to get to our transform tools again, and let's just drag this down. If I hold the Control key down, I can sort of work in almost like a freeform mode here, and just start manipulating points almost individually if you like. I'm not going to try anything spectacular here. That'll do. I'll press the Enter key. Now don't forget, each layer comes with its own opacity setting, so we can choose an opacity setting there. And let's put a layer mask on this layer, and let's access the gradient tool, and let's just try dragging, oops, too much, oops, too much, a small gradient just to get that to fade out slightly over there, like so. Maybe bump up the volume there. We're getting there. This movie's probably been going on too long as it is, but let's just do a few more things to this. I'm looking at the model's face here and thinking that it should be slightly brighter. And don't forget, she's on this layer. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and go in for something like a curves adjustment layer. Because I've got the Alt key held down, I get the opportunity to just clip the layer to the model layer by using this switch here, create a clipping mask. Basically all that means is that this adjustment with the curves now is only going to affect the layer it's attached to, which is the model. If I hadn't have held the Alt key down and created a clipping group, it would have affected all layers underneath it. Looking at the model's face there, let's just brighten the whole thing up a bit. Don't forget, that comes with a mask, so if I invert the mask, Control I, I'll zoom in. That was Control and plus on the keyboard. I'll press the letter B for my brush. Let me just right click on the brush and make sure I'm working with a soft edge brush. Don't forget, we're about to work on this mask in white, and that way we can reveal the brightening that curves layer is now applying. So this is without the curves, and that's with. And the beauty of that, it was very quick and easy, and of course we can adjust the opacity should we need to. Control and minus to zoom out, and on it goes. I think I'll conclude this movie here, but there's more that needs doing to this. For instance, if I was to zoom into the edge of the dress there, we can see where the drop shadow was on our original mask. I won't do it now, but very briefly, all you need to do is add another layer mask, and painting in black there, zooming in and working closely, you can just very quickly and easily mask that part of that old drop shadow out. I'll leave that one up to you. So I worked rather quickly there, but we are moving into more intermediate and onto more advanced techniques. So although I was working quite quickly there, the actions and the operations I were performing should start to begin to make sense.